this is not a full workshop here we're doing here, but what we are going to do here is we are going to, again, look at the 8 quadrants model, and I'm going to take you into the upper left-hand quadrant, the personal psyche quadrant, and we're going to look at some of the dark side and the healing side of the upper left-hand quadrant. And we're going to do that. Let's do that. Okay, so first I'm going to put back on the screen the whole map. The whole map that we're working on. And so you have your shadow side on the left. Again, it's the Ken Wilber's 4 quadrants, and it's Jungian, and it's alchemical. It's a whole lot of stuff that Melissa Mari and I developed over a decade, or more than a decade. And it's kind of summarized and put into this system here. So you have the dark side on the left, and you have the light side on the right. You have the 4 quadrants, meaning you have the first person, second person, third person, and third person plural, I, we, it, and its, or mind, body, culture, and civilization, or system. And today we're just going to we're going to do an overview of the mind quadrant, the upper left-hand quadrant. So now let me bring that in. I'm going to bring that in. Shadow slide 1. I'm going to pull that. So there we go. And where am I going to put myself? Am I going to put myself in there? I think I'm going to put myself down here. I'm going to cover up the matrix deep state part, and we're just going to look at the rest of it. So now, looks like a lot of material. It is a lot of material, and if you were to, do the full workshop, you'd be spending some real time on these things. But what I'm doing here is I'm showing you, okay, first of all, back to the center of the map. I put dragon in there. In the Transforming Darkness book, I just called it shadow, meaning the archetype of the shadow, the archetype of evil, as Jung called it. And so, but really, under Robert Moore's understanding, this is where the dragon terminology comes from. The human being is channeling libido energy, right? Libido. Libido is not just sexual energy like Freud said, or not just power drives like Adler said. It's all kinds of drives. It's all kinds of drives to create and to, like Robert Moore has the four archetypes. You get the magician, the warrior, the lover, the royal. So the royal is to create a kingdom and to bring everyone together and to nurture and to create and to foster community, right? And so there's a drive towards the royal. There's a drive towards the warrior that wants to create and maintain boundaries and get things done and have goals and be effective. That's the warrior side. That's the libido energy going into the warrior channel, or the magician channel that wants to figure things out and problem solve and be a scientist and be an alchemist and figure things out, be a healer, right? And so you can have libido energy towards that direction, or the lover, right? Your relational energy that wants to meld with people, wants to love people, wants to relate to people. And so you can have libido into any of these archetypal flows. And so that's dragon energy in Robert Moore's terminology. That's your kundalini. That's your chi. That's your libido. Your libido, your kundalini, your chi. This is all your human. This is your God energy. This is your cosmic energy. This is your life force. So your life force is pumping through the human psyche. And then to the degree it is imbalanced, it creates a shadow. It creates a psychopathology. It creates, neuroses, problems of all kinds. And so what you want to do is you need to relate, your ego needs to relate to your dragon energy. It needs to be able to bring it online and use it in the world, use it in your life. But if you allow it to get too hot, then you get inflated, they call it. You get grandiose. If you don't allow the energy to move through you, then you get depressed and ineffective and passive, and your life is not going the way it needs to go. And so, you have to basically analyze your inner state. You have to work through your imbalances. You have to have one or more models, really more than one, models for understanding the flow of psychic energy and how it can get imbalanced and how it can create complexes and how it can get tied up in what Robert Moore calls sideshows, or how it can just get blasted out in pure grandiosity. We call that narcissism, inflation, right? And then you just go around. At first, you'll be, it's the flight of Icarus. You're flying real, close to the sun, and you're pretty high. It's pretty great, but your wings are only made of wax, and so they're eventually that wax is gonna melt, and you're gonna fall crashing, humiliated, into the sea, and you're gonna have a dark night of the soul. You're gonna fall into the ocean, into the unconscious. And then this is the, let me write that down again. Another thing I got to add to my model here, the ego self-axis of Edward Edinger. This is the process of growing up, right? You're accessing your dragon energy. It's inflating your ego. You're feeling real high on your own supply. You're actually doing great things. But you don't have proper containment. You haven't built a strong cup, as Robert Moore would say. Been listening to a lot of Robert Moore lately, actually. That's why I'm kind of, this whole model can exist without any Robert Moore stuff. But I really like the way he explains things. And I'm quite familiar with his system and everything. So it's and he's not around anymore to talk like this, so it's a good thing. But yeah, so your cup, your container, your alchemical vessel of psyche has to be strong enough to be able to contain and handle your dragon energy, your grandiosity, your natural grandiosity, without getting inflated and run away and burning up yourself and others, burning up your life and humiliating yourself. Because then you just fall down into the sea, and then you're just depressed, and then you can't get your energy back again. And you're like, what? You're thinking of yourself as a loser. And then you can just have this cycle. Or some people, the narcissists, they won't even let themselves crash. And so they never learn. They just keep blaming and just moving on, burning one bridge after the next, because they won't let themselves fall down. They won't let themselves crash. Or like our whole nation right now, it won't come down to size. It won't learn its lessons. It's like more resources, more hegemony, more war, more control. Make America great again. What's that mean? It means more hegemony, more control. And it's like, okay, no, that's not what it means. It should mean higher levels of consciousness, more awareness, more maturity. And so So that's what you're working with. And so that's what's coming through the center of the image here. And in Jungian psychology, you have this understanding of the self with a capital S. So this self is represented as a circle or a mandala. And so that's why the image is actually a circle like that. And so that thing, that self, that's sort of the master tie back to the cosmos that brings the libido energy, the dragon energy into the psyche and into your reality. And then it gets pumped off into these different directions. So now, that's why that's in the center. So now, we're going to go to the upper left-hand quadrant, because usually when you're talking about psychospiritual healing, you're talking about alchemy, you're talking about inner work, you're talking about what's happening in the upper left-hand quadrant. That's the mind, that's the psyche, same thing. That's your inner state of being. That's what's going on inside you, inside the mind. And that's where most spiritual work, psychospiritual work is done. But what we get through the 4-quadrant model is we recognize that the work that we do on the personal psyche can be extrapolated into the culture, the body, and the society as a whole. You can actually reinterpret all this work that we're doing in the personal psyche for the collective and for the body. You can reinterpret it and go, wow, there's a holistic way to do shadow work in the mind, in the body, and in the greater collective. And so that's what the full 4 quadrants does. But typically when you're into Jungian psychology or some Buddhist practice or some other thing like that, you're working in the upper left-hand quadrant only. And it's not known, like, in some kind of Buddhist practice or something, or yoga of some kind, they will have aspects for the other quadrants. It's just that they're not, it's not known that they're connected this way. So this is kind of a new way to connect these things. But so here we are, upper left-hand quadrant, the shadow of the human psyche. Now, what is the shadow? That's the question. What is it? What's in it? And that's what we're doing here. And then in the next slide, we're going to get into how we work with it. So the shadow and I just have like a number of descriptions there. The shadow in an indigenous sense, like in ancient, pre-civilized societies, this would be considered soul loss or possession. And that terminology, possession, also goes into early religious points of view. And we're familiar with the Judeo-Christian civilization and the understandings of possession and exorcism and that kind of thing that comes from our Judeo-Christian tradition. So this is where people are saying someone is possessed. They're possessed by the devil. They're possessed by demons, right? Before Christianity, it's possession by the gods, right? And so it's possession in this prior understanding. By the time you make it into the modern era, and you have the science or the scientific art, let's say, of psychology, then you go into these other understandings. So when we're talking about the shadow in a modern psychological or psychiatric understanding, this is where we're talking about psychopathology, right? This is the drives and the energetics that are behind psychopathology. So personality disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, all the dark triad personality disorders, neuroses, compulsions, depression, addictions, anxiety, all of that whole realm of psychopathology. The behavioral part is just how you act it out, but what's behind it would be considered shadow material. In Jungian psychology, we have our own kind of system model for understanding the shadow that is unique to Jungian psychology. And so there, what you have is, because Jungian psychology starts with Freudian psychology, where you have a basic understanding of the ego and the id, right? Or the conscious and the unconscious. You also have the superego in Freudian psychology. And in Jungian psychology, you have the ego, the conscious mind, all your thoughts, your feelings too, your memories, all your fantasies, all that. That's all the conscious mind. That's the ego. And then you have an outer part, an outer mask that Jung called the persona, which is kind of like his version of the Freudian superego. And this is all the ego material that deals with how you present yourself to the social world. How you look, your degrees, your positions, what social group you fit into, and all that kind of stuff that has to do with how you fit into society and how you want to look to society. So you have that's consciousness. And then you have the unconscious, everything below the surface in the psyche, like under the water. And most of the unconscious is just all the different psychic operations that are going on to run your life and your personality and run your body and your reality. But the stuff that's really, really cannot get into the ego, and especially cannot get into the persona, because it's so oppositional to the way you think that you are, or the way that you think that you should be, or the way that your family or community or society thinks you should be. And everything that's oppositional to that, everything that's dark, is shoved way down into the unconscious in what Jung called the shadow. And so the shadow is created out of this natural split of the psyche of conscious and unconscious. And especially the fact that to have organized societies where everybody's getting along and they're not beating each other over the head with a brick and acting like cavemen, they have to contain their caveman energies. They have to shove their caveman energies down into the shadow. So everybody has animalistic and primal energies, libido energies, dragon energies that are totally antisocial. You can't just express your sexuality any way you want to in society. You can't just express your aggression, your rage, any way you want to, whenever you want to. Or you can't just, be a narcissistic. I mean, now it's almost become popular it's almost like an admirable quality to come off as a narcissist. But traditionally, you're supposed to keep that down a little bit. You're not supposed to be bragging all the time and getting high on your own supply constantly. So that would go down into the shadow. Or more feminine material like grief and guilt and feelings of inferiority and weaknesses, or jealousy and envy and all this kind of stuff, all the 7 deadly sins type stuff that you got in you, but you don't want to admit that you have it in you. And you certainly don't want your friends and family and coworkers and society to know that you have. And so you can't even deal with it. You don't know what to do with it. So the psyche just naturally just kicks it down into the shadow. And that's what creates the shadow, is this natural split. And then that's why we have dualistic religion like we do, where you have God, the good guy, and the devil, the bad guy, because it's just a mythic projection of the way the psyche's working. So you shove all this stuff down into the shadow because you can't just exercise it any way you want, whenever you want, and then it's got to go somewhere. And so you repress it, and then you project and displace it out. And there's sort of an operation of the way this is done. You first find someone out in the world who's a proper carrier for your own shadow material. So you find yourself a Donald Trump, or you find yourself a Hillary Clinton, or you use your wife or your husband or the neighbor or whoever it is that you want to hang your shadow onto, right? Or project it onto. And the person who really triggers you, that thing about them that really triggers you that you can't stand about them, or that's really getting you, they really got you triggered, that's because that aspect is partially in your own shadow. You haven't really come to terms with it fully. And so you hang your shadow on that other person. You say, oh, that person is the one that is the jealous one, the envious one, the arrogant one, the narcissistic one, the evil one, the aggressive one, right? You put it on them, and they might be to some degree. You usually find somebody that has some of these qualities leaking out a little bit, and then you go, yes, got you, you're the one, and then you can project onto them. Now they can hold that material for you. Your conscious ego doesn't have to deal with it. Your conscious ego gets a chance to get in touch with envy, jealousy, sexuality, rage, aggression, guilt, whatever the shadow thing is. It gets in touch with it, but it gets in touch with it through watching it in another person. It doesn't get in touch with it through actually metabolizing it and saying, wow, this is me. That person is reminding me of me. That thing that got brought up, that triggered me, it's not just in them, it's in me too. And so you can just kind of share the responsibility. When you're hating on someone or mad at someone or whatever because of you're seeing that they're bad in some way, you can just be fair about it, and you can let them hold half of the responsibility. Maybe they are bad, but then you're the other half. And then it takes a certain amount of stoic courage and strength to process that energy and to metabolize it and recognize that that's part of you. What we usually do is we don't do that. We don't do that integration work. What we do is we project, we find the bad person, and then we go displace our own shadow energy through taking action against them in the world. We get involved in all kinds of family drama or community, political fights, soap opera stuff. We do that, or we become keyboard warriors against the deep state or whatever, right? Or we go into the protest in the street and we protest and all of that, and we just keep this kind of channel going of projecting and displacing and projecting and displacing onto the outer world. And then we never get to the business of actually recognizing that half that energy is in you. Maybe more than half, maybe a lot more than half. But let's at least say that it's shared that way, and that you got to process your half of the equation. So that's hard to do. It's hard to do. That's a hero's journey. And that's why so few people do it. We've known about how this works for 100 years now. It's been well described and well understood and proven to work this way for 100 years or more. Jung pretty much got it figured out by the 20s. And now we're in the 2020s. By the time we got to the 50s, he really understood how it was. So it's 80 to 100 years old now. And almost no one is taking it seriously. Even the Jungians have fallen down on the job. So we can't expect everyone to do this, but this is very, very admirable, very heroic, very courageous, and very necessary work that ends up cleaning yourself out. It ends up evolving you. Your whole consciousness raises. People talk about raising your consciousness. This process is how you do that. Yes, you can meditate and you can reach even non-dual states in meditation, but they don't last. This is how you develop a consistently less triggerable, more balanced psyche, and how you don't get sucked into these games like I was describing earlier with the deep state and stuff that just keeps you embroiled in conflict. You get above that, and then you start purging the energy. You start metabolizing the energy. Now, the way you do that, the actual methods of integration, Jung had some of that figured out, and now we have some other things that we can add to it. So, but let me just stay with my list here, and because now I've talked about the this area here, ego, shadow, split, repression, projection, and displacement. That's the basic. I gave you the basic rundown of what the shadow is and how it works in the psyche. And then what happens is when the next thing down on the list is when you get people together who all unconsciously agree on what the target should be for their rage or whatever emotion, then they will get together, and that's how you get wars. Right? That's how you get all these big societal conflagrations, where you get people who will collectivize around a particular projection, and then everybody gets to dump, everybody gets to project and displace their energy onto the other side. But interestingly, it's not just about attacking the other side. Each side gets to dump their aggression. So that's step one, is you get everybody collectivized. This is the collective shadow for Jung, or what Matthias Desmet calls mass formation, or what Paul Levy calls Wetiko. It's a collectivization of psychic energy. And everybody gets to rage on each other, but that's only the masculine side. That's only the active moving side. Because then you get the other side of it, which is the more feminine grief side, because every war not only gives you a chance to express your rage and your aggression, but it gives you a chance to experience intense grief and suffering, because people die, your friends and family die. You get to attack the other side and kill their friends and family, and they get to attack your side and kill your friends and family. So then the whole system gets fed out of that. The collective pain body, the collective shadow gets energy out of that. And so that's not very healthy, is it? And that's where we're at. And like I said, we've known about how this works for 100 years, and we're still doing it, and no one wants to look at this. And because it just requires a higher level of maturity. And so we got to, I can't make anybody do this work. No one can. All I can do is when people who are naturally inclined to do this work, because the people who will do this work, I call them the alchemists, the people who will do this work, we are a natural function of the human organism. We are, you could call us imaginal cells, like the New Agers used to use that term, like butterfly cells. But I've been saying alchemical cells. We are evolutionary in nature. We are operating at another level and doing something different. And if you look at integral theory and you look at second tier, and you look and see the kind of characteristics of people in second tier, that will give you a clue as to kind of the way these alchemical cells think or how they're naturally oriented. And we are people that are naturally, even though going into the shadow and doing this kind of processing is hard, it can be very, very hard. It's actually no harder than just suffering under your own unconsciousness. It's no harder than that at all. But it's evolutionary at the same time, and you're helping yourself grow up and you're helping the whole human race grow up. But the kinds of people who are naturally attracted to this and who will do it and be able to do it, they will hear stuff like this and they will go, oh, okay, right, okay, yeah. Other people who are on the path, wow, great, more alchemists, other alchemists. They might not know all the Jungian psychology and all that stuff, but they will recognize, wow, that's my language. They're speaking my language over there. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm looking for people who want to do the alchemy, who want to raise their consciousness, who want to work out their wounds. They're not afraid of going into their shadow. They have enough tolerance, natural courage and tolerance to be able to, like I heard Robert Moore talking about Robert Bly using the term "eat your own ashes," an alchemical understanding. Eat your own ashes, right? You burn up, and then you eat your own ashes, and you come out of it like the phoenix. And then you burn up again, and you eat your own ashes, and you come out of it again. And you just keep on purifying and keep on doing it. And every time you get off balance, every time you get grandiose, every time you get all inflated, every time you get triggered, you go, okay, the world either knocks you back and then you wake up, or hopefully after a while, you get good enough at it to where you don't need the world to knock you back and wake you up. As soon as your energy gets too imbalanced on one side or the other, then you wake up to it and you go, oh, okay, here I am. I'm triggered. I got junk. I got shadow junk. It's coming up. I got a complex that's triggered. I got a pain body that's triggered, however you want to look at it. And then you process it. So now let's where are we? So now I'm going to talk to you about the processing of this, and we're going to do that in our next slide. But right now we're still on the diagnosis side of things, and so I'll just finish with the list here. So in the shadow, this is where these terms like autonomous complex from Carl Jung, or your parts, your exiled parts and their cooperative protector parts that work with them in IFS. This is close to Jung's autonomous complexes. So this would be shadow material. The personal and relational pain body, Eckhart Tolle's idea that you have a psychic parasite that's eating the energy of despair and all negative emotions, right? This is all the same stuff. These are all different models of looking at the active side of the shadow. Or in Robert Moore's system, it's like I was talking about the four archetypes, the royal, the king, the warrior, and the lover. When those get imbalanced, when that grandiose energy gets imbalanced, then you get a shadow manifestation in those areas. So these are all ways of looking at shadow material and that which is within the shadow. Okay, so now, and if anybody wants to get the full rundown on this, just go back to the beginning of this video after I'm done, and you will hear the whole presentation. And then last week, I did like an overview of the whole thing, although I don't think I did a very good job of it, and I'm going to keep doing it and doing it better, because this whole system is, this is a new presentation here. Okay, so let's pull up the Solutio side now. Boom, boom. Right. Okay. Now this side of the equation, we've got, just go to the right side again. So remember in the center of the other one, of the shadow side of the equation, we had your libido energy, your chi, your kundalini, right? Your grandiosity, your energy coming through, right through the center, through the big S self in Jungian psychology, right? And then when that gets the dragon, as Robert Moore called it, that's what was in the center of the last slide. And when that gets imbalanced, then you get all that psychopathology. Well, on the balance side, we're using Melissa's term homobilancia, right? So this is balanced mankind. This is where you're going. This is the goal of the whole thing, is to be a balanced, whole human being who has access to your libido energy, who has access to your chi, but is not, falling all over the place or blowing themselves or the world up with it. So now, I've also got on here Robert Moore's 4 archetypes, and we're not going to go into that today because we're just, like I said, each program going forward, we're going to concentrate on one quadrant. But yes, so we got the royal, the warrior, or the Amazon in the female psyche, or the magician or the medial the magician or the medial in the female psyche. And then at the bottom here we have the lover. Let's see, where is that? I'm trying to move that out of the way. Yeah, the lover right there. But we're not going to be going into that today. We're not going into any of the other quadrants. So right now we're back to our upper left-hand quadrant right here. And so we're on the solution side. All right, now, what is the solution for all this shadow imbalance? What do we do? How do we integrate our shadows? And so, we get engaged in what we would call spiritual alchemy, inner alchemy, individuation, as Carl Jung would call it. Shadow work is what we're doing. Shadow work is the first area of work that we're doing. We're working with the prima materia, the first matter, the lower matter. That's your lower nature. That's your shadow material. Everything that we went through in the last slide. And so, starting from the top of our list here, we're doing inner work as spiritual practice, as life practice, right? And so, this is important to point out that when you're doing psycho-spiritual work on yourself, when you're doing psychological work on yourself, let's pull out spiritual, psychological work on yourself, it naturally becomes or is a spiritual process. Because the more that you get in touch with the material of your own unconscious, and you start grabbing hold of this numinosity, so to speak. You start grabbing hold of these collective images, as Jungians would call them, and you start getting in touch with this, and you're analyzing your dreams, and you're analyzing the inner-outer relationship between your world and your inner psyche, as above, so below, and you're recognizing that the outer world is it's a collective movie, but some of your own personal projections are in it, and it's showing you, once you develop symbolic literacy, you're like, oh, okay. And you can use the external world, like I was talking about earlier, with the wounded deer, or things that happen in your external world. You're interpreting them as dream material. You're interpreting synchronicities as dream material, and you're saying, what does this mean? And you're moving into the world of the mythic, right? And then as you get in touch with this material, as you start touching your inner world in a deeper and deeper way, whether it's by yourself or in the context of your relationship, which is really the higher level to do it, then you are naturally, you're talking to the psyche. You're talking to the Jungian big S self. You're talking with God within you, right? You're in the inner heaven. You're in the inner cosmos. And everything that we would consider to be spiritual in the deepest sense, everything that is transcendent or spiritual in the deepest sense, can be found inside of you. That's the closest place that you can go. And in fact, just going and using external images, external idols, external rituals, those external things are resonating with your internal state. And so they are activating your quote-unquote spirituality by engaging in ritual religious practice. But it's still one step removed from the actual source. So when you're doing inner work, that's your mind and body is your temple, as the spiritual folks like to say, right? And it's really true. It really is. And that's where God appears, right? So if you neglect your inner work, or if you just engage in sort of the outer version of spirituality, just the outer ritualistic side of it, and you don't go probing and go journeying within, well, then you're not really you're not living a sacred life. You're living a profane life, right? So, and then if you're afraid of your shadow stuff, because you haven't been taught that it's okay, or maybe you've been raised in a religious tradition that thought, oh, wow, you might find a demon in there, and then that's, you don't want to do that. You got to run to the light and all this. Then, or you're just not attuned to this way. You're just not a natural at it or whatever. And so you would just stay out of this domain. No one's telling you to go inside. No one in this extroverted, narcissistic external world is telling you to go inside, right? So, I mean, some people are, Deepak Chopra is, but look at him. So, is he really going inside? No, not really. Not to the degree he needs to be. So, so that's the first thing to say about this is that inner work is spiritual practice. It is a religious and truly like I was talking about Mircea Eliade, the great comparative mythologist and professor of religions. His understanding of profane man or homo religiosus, sacred, mankind who sees the world and everything in it as sacred. That's where we're going with this. That's what this is all about. So doing shadow work, engaging in individuation, in inner practice is your spiritual work. This is a spiritual way of life and being. So that's what it is. Now, as everybody knows who looks into spiritual practice of any kind, first thing you're going to find is that you get engaged in meditation. You do meditation, right? Yes, you can do meditation. It's good for you. Right? It's good for you. It's a good practice. It quiets the mind. It teaches you how to watch your thoughts. It relieves your anxiety. It's good. It teaches discipline. It's a good thing to do. But it is actually not the bulk of the work. And there's a lot more work to be done outside of meditation. And I also have a list here, what I call what is called open focus meditation, which kind of maybe should be in the upper right-hand quadrant, the body quadrant. But it kind of goes between the two of them. And that is a system, you can look it up, where you where you do sort of a relaxation technique on your body, and you just go through different parts of your body, and you do this little mental trick, and it relaxes the muscles all throughout your body. And you can get your whole body so relaxed if you don't fall asleep, which is a problem with that system. But if you don't fall asleep, you can get your whole body so relaxed that you can barely even move your finger. It's just like you're knocked out on morphine or something. And so that is a very powerful way to just relax your whole physiology. And then you can actually do the normal kind of Zen type meditation in that state. Again, if you can stay awake. So it's a real good practice. So those kinds of things, obviously that's kind of right there, that's on top. And then when you get into the Jungian system like we are here, you're diagnosing your projections and your triggers, like I was talking about earlier. You're noticing, why am I triggered in this way? It's not just that outer person. It's not just the Barack Obama or the Donald Trump or the neighbor or that person or whoever it is, my spouse, whatever. It's not just them. It's me too. And so you go into it and you say, well, what was it in me that was triggered? What was it in me that got me all out of whack? Well, you have a complex in there that got activated, but what's behind the complex? Jung would always say that a complex has an archetypal core. And so that you can go looking then for an archetype. You can go look in myth and folklore, in culture, and you can go look for an archetype, like a warrior, a magician, a lover. You can go look for an archetype and see if you can align that archetype with your particular energy or your particular way of being triggered. So that's one way that you can kind of go into it. But you trace it down, and then you can just trace it down and, well, how often was I triggered? Am I always triggered by this type of thing or this type of experience? Am I always triggered by like that? Were my parents triggered in that same way, right? And you can kind of dig into it and go looking for what type of energy. This is why you want to develop some kind of psychological literacy, because then you can diagnose the type of energy that is shooting out when you're triggered. And so you go find that, and then you go take responsibility for it, and you isolate it, and you name it. And not only do you name it, because you can name it using Jungian understandings, you can name it as a type of a complex, or you can use IFS therapy and you can name it as a type of a part, and you can give it a name. And those are very helpful. But you can also, I think it's like the fourth thing down on the list, you can emotionally process your triggers. And I'd say this is more important than naming. And so you basically, after you're triggered, or you may not get triggered by something that's, specific in life, or something someone said, or seeing something on the news, or whatever it is, or, whatever. It may be something you woke up with, right? It may just be an attitude or a mood that you kind of moved into over a period of days, right? And you can go sit with that, but especially after a trigger, you can go sit with that, and then you allow that energy to come up into your system, into your whole body, and flood up, and you give it permission to come up. If it's anger, it's rage, and you let it come up, and you let it flush your face, and you sit with it, and you don't distract yourself on your phone, or drink wine, or smoke a joint, or whatever other distraction. You go sit with it, and you let that energy come up and take over your body, and that actually rechannels it physiologically creates new pathways for that energy that has been continually repressed. It allows it to come up into consciousness and into the body itself. Now, often you'll find that below anger is grief or sadness or some more feminine or darker kind of emotion, more feminine emotion. And so you might end up crying, and that's good. That's what you want to do. You want to work through the anger or whatever's on top, and then down into the grief or the sadness, the feelings of insecurity, whatever they are that are coming up, the feminine feelings, and then you want to cry through those things. It's very important, and especially in a society that doesn't really know how to cry, like we have here. Not just men and women. Obviously, it's more men, but it's men and women. And so you want to sit with the trigger, the energy behind it, and you want to process it and allow yourself to move through those different emotions, and that physiologically balances your whole system. And you just do that as a matter of course. You just make that part of your life practice. Now, if you're married or your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, you want them to be involved in it. Or at least know that you're doing this practice so that when you get into a fight with them or whatever, you can go sit down and you can process the energy and they know what you're doing. And hopefully they're sitting on the other side of the couch and they're processing at the same time as you. And then you can talk about what happened. And if you have some background in IFS, which is easier to get into than Jungian psychology, then you can go, okay, well, what part was that? What's that exiled part that got hurt that a manager or a firefighter could not deal with? And that exiled part got hurt. That hurt little boy or girl got hurt again. And so that's what is causing all this. And then you can trace that down and you know your named parts. And then you work with those parts. And each person, the spouse, or the partner, they recognize each other's parts. And you can even talk to each other as parts. Like when Melissa was here, we would, it would be, she would have a part, mad girl, let's say, would come up, or running girl, or sad girl would be up. And so I would talk to the part, and I wouldn't say Melissa, I would say sad girl this, sad girl that, mad girl this, mad girl that. For me, it wasn't as differentiated. She was very Melissa, and I don't know if I think this is something more with women, and they can more often find more differentiated parts and talk to them, and so it's a really beautiful thing if you can do that. If you could really, IFS, it's often, you look up IFS and you see people are talking to their different parts and stuff, but not everyone finds it that easy to just isolate your different parts and have communication with them. And sometimes it's more just like, in my case, it's more just like monkey boy, we called him. Little boy. And he's got different parts inside of himself, but they're not quite as dissociated as they were in Melissa's case. Now, maybe also because Melissa had schizophrenia in her mother, and so maybe her psyche was already naturally a little looser, a little less kind of pulled together. I think that's probably the case. And so she could get more kind of access to the different holons or parts. And so you talk to your parts. You don't have to say, so-and-so, Jack or Jill is bad. You could say, well, Monkey Boy was up again, he was doing this. Or Mad Girl was up and she was doing this. And then the ego can get a little relief. You don't have to attack the other person's ego. And so that's a really good way of bringing in some context here for when you're triggered, and you need to diagnose things and pull things apart and understand what parts were getting mad or active or fearful or whatever they were. You have some kind of a model using the IFS system. Eckhart Tolle, going down the list here, Eckhart Tolle used the term pain body, a psychic parasite. The pain body is kind of like just a simpler way of thinking about the same dynamic, but it's a little bit more negative in a way, because in IFS, Richard Schwartz says there are no bad parts. He doesn't want you to demonize parts, even parts that are really scary. They're put in that situation for a reason. They are reacting to their traumatic circumstances that formed them. Whereas in Tolley's understanding of the pain body, it's kind of all shoved into one big psychic parasite of a model. And the parasite feeds on negative emotion. And so it triggers you, or it triggers other people in the world to get itself fed. Like we were talking earlier about the CIA, the Conflict Instigation Agency. The pain body is your internal CIA. And it's looking for a fight, it's looking for a conflict, it's looking to trick you, it's looking to rope you in. And it will talk to the pain body in your partner or in another person. It'll even be someone on the street. You can have an interaction. People get into fights on the street and stuff, or some kind of interaction. It's because those two pain bodies are talking, they're hanging out, they're dancing. And so you want to, in that system, you want to try to understand what your pain body profile is. What was the occurrence that formed the pain body? What kind of trauma was back there in your family, in your childhood, or maybe in your parents that was passed to you? And you're going in there and you're digging into the memories and you're looking back and you're trying to integrate, bring to consciousness. Integrate just means bring to consciousness. It just means put a flashlight on it. Look at it. When you look at something and you turn it around and you look at it from every dimension, and you look at it in terms of cognitive understanding and emotional. To integrate something is not just to see it with your eyes and your vision and write it down and make art out of it and stuff, although it is all that. It's to feel it too. It's to consciously re-feel the emotion. So that's how you work with your pain body. Again, back to being triggered, the pain body's triggered, and then you go sit with it, you do the emotional processing, and then you try to trace it down, and you try to use some kind of a model to name it and understand what these parts are doing. Now, in Robert Moore's system, I have here balancing archetypal grandiosity. In Robert Moore's system, we're going to hold off on that, but it's in the map here. The four, I could keep talking about the royal, the warrior, the magician, the lover. 4 different types of energy that can go and get imbalanced. The royal can become tyrannical, right? Or the warrior can get sadistic or masochistic. Or the lover can become an addict. Or it can become totally turned off and unable to experience ecstasy and joy. Or the magician, the warrior can also become, just addicted to aggression and fighting and stuff. The magician can just become a workaholic, just problem solving and figuring stuff out and everything. Or on the passive side, it can just be what he calls the dummy. I can't figure anything out. What the hell? Can you figure this out for me? I just can't understand. Not using your brain. And just not taking responsibility for your ability to figure stuff out. And always relying on other people. Always relying on doctors or other smart people or whatever to figure stuff out for you. That's the passive side of the shadow magician. So you can use Robert Moore's system to diagnose yourself that way too. It's another map to put on top of things and go, okay. And you got to use multiple maps. Now you can just start with one. IFS is kind of nice because you can just kind of start with that and go with that, and then you can bring in these other things. Or even pain body, the pain body idea. It's right there in any of Eckhart Tolle's books. He's got a chapter on it, and you can just look at that, and then wow, that really answers a lot. Journaling and dream journaling. So this is Jungian. When you journal, it's important to journal when you're doing inner work. Just keep a journal, even if you don't do it every single day. Try to do it when anything important comes up, when anything new, anything important comes up. Just write it in your journal. Some people have good handwriting, and you can just do a handwritten journal. My handwriting is so terrible that I just use online. I use my Mac notes program, and I just keep different folders, and I get a journal program or journal folder. I used to use Evernote, but I'm not using that anymore. So, and dream journaling. And the way I've been doing dream journaling lately is I always used to write down my dreams, but now I've been speaking them into my voice memos app in my iPhone. And then what I can do is I can use an AI program to transcribe them, right? So that's really cool because I just have my phone, even on airplane mode or whatever next to me when I'm sleeping. And then I wake up in the middle of the night, I can just, boom, turn on voice memos and I can just talk into it and record my dreams. So I get a lot more down that way. And then one thing I learned is that with voice memos, at least, there's not a super easy way to it's a little bit of a hassle to get them out of there. So you kind of you don't want to acquire, like I did last time, 678 files that I had to dump all at once. So, every few months you want to back it up, but, and you don't have to transcribe them unless you need them later or whatever it is. But anyway, dream journal. So when you're dream journaling, you're just allowing information to make it into consciousness, and you're just getting it from the unconscious into the cognitive segments of your consciousness. When you're dream journaling, you're doing the same thing, but you're also doing what they call amplification, where you're actually taking images and you're using your symbolic literacy to interpret what's going on, understanding that this dream material is symbolic, it's metaphorical, and that it's showing you something about yourself and where you're at in life and the processes that are going on in the unconscious, but it's showing it to you through symbol, through metaphor, through the mythic domain, right? And then you can practice interpreting that, and you can look up other people's interpretations. You can look at mythology and tarot and things like this where we deal with the mythic domain, and you can start to learn how to interpret that. Then you can actually go into active imagination if you want to. This is a Jungian technique where you take your dream material, and wherever your dream cuts off, you can just contemplate that when you're awake, or maybe even when you're when you've just awakened and you're still in bed, and you can just kind of take the dream and you can use your imagination, your fantasy, to be able to imagine what would come next. Where would the dream go next? And what you want to do is kind of like how a musician or an artist is improvising. You don't want to put a lot of thought into it. You just want to kind of allow it to kind of go. So you could actually speak into your phone while you're doing this if you want to, and you could just allow your imagination to take your dream to another place and see what shows up. And then that will give you more information even about what's in the unconscious and what the unconscious wants to do. That's, a talent, a skill, I should say, because it's so easy to get your own consciousness involved in the fantasy, in the imagination, and taint it. But that is something that Jungians do, and that we do and have done. I'm almost at the bottom of my list here, and then I'm gonna look at everybody's comments there. And thank you for commenting. And I haven't been going back and forth and looking at your comments today because I've found that doing these broadcasts, it's harder for me to do these talks, these presentations when I'm having to go back and forth. So I think a lot of podcasters do this. They kind of segment their time to answer comments and all of that, or take calls or whatever to a certain part of the program. And so I think that's what I'm doing right now. So thanks for hanging with me. And then I'll go through all your comments and we'll talk. But because we're almost done here. Now, golden shadow work cannot be forgotten about, because in the shadow, as the Jungians know, in the shadow is not just all of your, it's typically what we think of as shadow material is all of your lower material, your all the material that's antithetical to your ego or to the way society thinks you ought to be, and and like we were going over earlier, but you also have in your shadow is your genius, right? Your genius can be in your shadow. Not everybody grew up in a family where the parents were really noticing the genius of the child and then really mirroring that and going, wow, you're really good at that. And wow, maybe we should sign you up for dancing lessons or music lessons, or maybe you should get into the debate class in school or whatever it is, and really mirroring that and really paying close attention to where the child's natural energy and talents are, and then facilitating the flow of that energy. Or in some cases, the parent is noticing that, but then the parent is like what Robert Moore says, putting them on the high chair. And then they become grandiose and inflated, and they become a little Lord Fauntleroy, is I think one of the images that we can use, or the spoiled princess, right? She becomes a spoiled princess because she was only told how beautiful and great she is, and then she starts going around in the world thinking how amazing she is, and how everybody needs to worship her. And then she goes out in the world and she finds out that that doesn't work so well. And so these are both underemphasis or overemphasis of your natural talents. But so everybody has to get into proper relationship with their gold and with their psychospiritual gold. And when that gold is in the shadow and it can't fully be touched because it never really was explored that deeply enough, or when you have explored your gold in prior times in life and you've gotten a hold of that gold and you've pulled it out and you've been like, wow, I'm pretty damn amazing in this way. And then you put that into your ego, and then you walk around all confident thinking how great you are and stuff, and then you're actually kind of fragile and you get knocked down. And then you're in the dirt, and then you're like, wow, I wasn't so great. This sucks. And then maybe you don't want to pull your gold back out again. And so it kind of stays down in the unconscious, it stays in the shadow, and you never fully develop it. So this is a part of the work, is getting in touch with your gold, pulling it out, putting it into consciousness, taking some knocks, and then rebuilding yourself and developing a strong psychic container for your psychological gold, your genius, your daimon, your vocation, your calling. And so you're able to channel your calling without, being too fragile. Like if somebody, insults you or whatever, you're so fragile that, or being so grandiose that you can never be shown anything else. You can never be corrected. You can never take a hint, as we say, because you're so high on your own supply. And so everything's in the duality spectrum here, a little too little of something or a little too much of something. You can see after I've done this whole talk here, the whole thing is about balance. That's why it's homobilancia right in the center, right? So it's all about not too little and not too much. And when you get to the edges of the whole thing, you get to the extremes, and you got to come back to the middle. And you have to take some knocks and understand that this is the work, this is what we have to go through, this is what it takes. Everyone naturally grows up to the age 18 or 25, and then you're biologically done growing. And a lot of people, most people don't grow that much psychologically after that. In fact, I would say that collectively America is like a 17-year-old boy, right? So we're not as psychologically mature as we are in years. I don't know what the average age of Americans is. I don't know if it's 35, something like that. But we have an adolescent consciousness, it seems like. That's my intuition on it. And so, but we have the opportunity to grow, to be true adults, if we will do this work, and if we can You got to be, I think some people do grow up in good families, and some people don't have to do a whole lot of work on themselves. And that's great. How nice. So you got to be just screwed up enough to where you need to work on yourself, and then you have to be inclined to do that. And then you do work on yourself, and then you make yourself much greater than you would have been otherwise. But if you're too messed up, if you're too fractured, then you're too delicate, and you can't really. You can't really mess around. Your ego is too fragile. It can't be cracked too easily, and it's just too hard to go into this kind of stuff. There's so much energy down there that can get let loose, and there's so many knocks and scrapes that you have to suffer on the path. And a lot of people, they just can't do it. They just can't do it. And so they just have to do the best that they can with what they have. And that's where most of humanity is. And then there's the people who can do some amount of work. And then there's people who can do a little more. And then there's people who do a lot. And some people can do a whole lot. Those are very heroic people. Melissa Mari was like that. A very heroic, courageous example for how deep and how far can you go. So now, the last thing on my list is psychosomatic symptoms as shadow material. So you can look at the work of John Sarno for this. This kind of also bridges the two right-hand quadrants. The upper left and the upper right quadrants, mind and body. This is between the two. So this is where your shadow material that is getting blocked, right? You have all kinds of different governors that will block your material, your libido, your energy, so that it won't spill out and get you hurt. There's fears back there. There's fears. There's insecurities, and so what the psyche may do is dump your energy, dump your libido into the body, dump it into back pain, dump it into neck pain, dump it into migraines, dump it into fibromyalgia or other syndromes, dump it into carpal tunnel syndrome or whatever other of the 1,000 new syndromes that have shown up over the last 50 years, right? So you may be getting psychosomatic symptoms of all kinds. And once you realize that you are of a personality type where you get psychosomatic symptoms as this is shadow material being dumped into the body, then you can start tracking it, and you can stop getting so worried about every time you have another pain or every time you have another weird, you wake up with vertigo or whatever it is. And, I get all kinds of back, neck, leg, shoulder pain. My dad had a lot of that. Melissa's dad had a lot of that. But my dad actually figured out, this is TMS, we call it, in Sarno's system. It's an acronym. It doesn't matter what it stands for. It's just TMS. So when you're getting TMS, you're getting psychosomatic pain or symptoms, and you recognize, okay, I got psychological junk. I got stuff. I got shadow material. I got stuff that's coming up. I got stuff in my life. I got too much on my plate. Things are past my tolerance level, and it's getting dumped into the body. Okay. So you make a list of all the things that you got on your plate, and then you try to scratch off the things that you can scratch off, the things that are easier that you can take care of first. And then you'll notice that the pressure will go down, and then the pain and the syndromes will lessen. So if you're a kind of person who gets psychosomatic symptoms, body-based symptoms, as a way for the psyche to deal with internal pressures, if you're that kind of person, you need to kind of live a balanced and kind of simplistic lifestyle, right? And you don't want to be you definitely can't force yourself and become a hermit because you can't go out in the world and, oh, I can't work, I can't lift anything, I can't do that, oh, my body. You don't do that. What you do is you actually act like you don't have any problems. You don't talk about your stuff. You don't write down on any papers that you have these symptoms or syndromes. You don't do nothing about it except for deal with it at the psychological level. If it gets so extreme, then probably, yes, you might have to deal with it at the physical level. But as long as it's manageable, you deal with it psychologically through doing this kind of work. So there we go. That is that was my presentation for day. And so now you can see how, what this would be like if I gave a talk where I did all the quadrants, the dark side and the light side. That was what, I think I did an hour or something just to do it. It would be like a 4-hour or more workshop to do the whole thing. So there we go. Now let me go and see what you guys have been saying this whole time. How can I use my warrior side? What do you mean by libido? All right. Integration or balance happens naturally, spontaneously, or do we have to seek it? Okay, fantastic questions. And you might have heard some of my answers if you're still hanging out. You might have heard some of my answers as we were going through here. And your warrior side is the side of your personality that uses aggression. So ask yourself, where are you using aggression in your life? Where are you using aggression in your life? Are you using it at work? Are you police, military, something like that? Are you using it in sports? Or are you dumping it into conflicts with your wife, or other people, or being a keyboard warrior, on the internet or whatever? Where's your aggression going? But also, the warrior is also about using focus and targeting things and saying, I'm going to accomplish that. I'm going to put my energy into that. I'm going to get that done. It's about establishing boundaries and saying, this is where we go and we don't go any further than this. This is what you use when you're establishing boundaries, when you're sticking up for yourself or you're helping other people stick up for themselves. This is the part of you that is able to get stuff done and be effective in life. So you're using that masculine energy, whether you're a man or a woman, you're using masculine active energy to target something and to get it done, and to do it effectively with courage and strength. So where are you using that in your life? Everyone has to have that going. That has to be channeled somewhere. So if your general lifestyle doesn't have a space for that, well, then you need to be in a jiu-jitsu class or something like that, or some other kind of competitive sport or something like that. You need to find a proper outlet for your aggression, or let's just say your warrior energy, or it will get sidelined into these other places, or it will be getting projected out onto other people. Now you want to attack so-and-so. You see some other warrior in the world. You see some other strong guy, some other warrior guy, some other warrior politician or something like that, and it triggers you, and you say, oh, bad, that person's bad. They're so aggressive. And well, that's because you have some of your own warrior energy is in your shadow. And you need to get in touch with that warrior energy in yourself and find a proper outlet for it. So you'll first see your warrior energy, if it's repressed, through your projections, through not liking other warrior people or warrior activities and things like that. So, and then you can trace it back to yourself, and then you can find a proper outlet for your warrior energy. And what do I mean by libido? Like I said earlier, libido was originally defined by Freud as sexual energy, but then other depth psychologists like Adler and Jung redefined it as all psychic energy. This is in Chinese, this is qi, right? And in the Hindu, this is your kundalini. This is the energy of life that is pumping through your veins, through your blood, through your psyche. This is the energy of life, and it's got to go somewhere. And so it's going to go into your personality, depending on the way your personality recipe is. It's going to go into different areas, but it's your creativity. This is all your libido. Does this process work for integration does this process for integration or balance happen naturally? No, okay. It doesn't happen completely naturally. You have an intuition, you have introspective capacities as a human being so that you can problem solve your internal state when you need to. But if you're very distracted, living a very busy life, or you don't have examples in your family of problem solving your inner state, then you might not go there very much. And you also need some kind of external, because human beings don't just operate on instinct completely like animals do. We are also cultural. A great deal of what we learn about how to operate ourselves comes from the culture, comes from the family, comes from the culture. And so it all depends on you and what your particular environment is, whether or not you have enough tools or you have enough mentors or elders who are going to help steer you when you get imbalanced. And if you are naturally introspective and intuitive and you have some wise elders around you, well, then you probably can get oriented without, a whole lot of psychological knowledge. But the fact is that most of the time we don't have that around us. That we're deprived in those areas. And so that's where we have to actually go seek out mentors. This is where Mircea Eliade talks about initiations, cultural initiations. Like if you go back to primitive societies where when boys, especially boys, when they get to be adolescents and they have all this testosterone and all this libido, that can get channeled into all kinds of places that can hurt themselves or hurt their community. And so then you have ritual elders that basically initiate them into some kind of position, usually like a warrior position, some kind of position, and say, this is your place in life, and here's your ethics, and here's your spirituality, and here's how you're supposed to be, and if you have a problem, come back to us, and we'll set you straight. And so you have these initiatory elders that are orienting you in the right direction and keeping an eye on you. But in this distracted, narcissistic, Luciferian world that we're living in right now, we have a really, we don't have a lot of that. We don't have a lot of that. And, we had some, in the 20th century, we had some amazing people. We had some amazing Jungians. We had Joseph Campbell and Alan Watts. We had all kinds of wise people that were teaching us things. And there's always wise people that are just tucked into the community, right? And you don't really know until you just run into them. They're in your family, they're in your community, there's always those people. And they're not making a big deal out of it. They're just, so most wise people and people who have a certain level of maturity are just doing their thing. And you just work with them, you run into them, and they help reorient you. So it's a combination of being oriented by your community, if the community is healthy enough to do that, and you orienting yourself based on your own introspection and what you can learn and practice from books and working on yourself and hopefully with your partner too. And so that's how this is all done. And so, you're talking to somebody who's coming from the Jungian orientation, and so that's where I will point you. There's so many great Jungians. There's Carl Jung himself, even though he's difficult to read at first, and there's so many great Jungians, inner city books, right? Inner city books is where, that's kind of one of the big Jungian publishers and all those authors, and so you're going to get plenty of stuff to orient you there. Hi, Mary. Just put, what is libido in the Jungian sense into AI? Okay, well, AI will tell you what AI tells you, and hopefully it'll tell you something that's a little more updated than just the Freudian, and that you will, because the Freudian, it's sexual energy, but then as you go on through the history of depth psychology, it's just all psychic energy. Hi, Leslie. Hi, if you're still hanging around. Sorry, it took me a while to get to everybody's comments, like I said, because I was doing that presentation, and so you're very welcome. You're very welcome to tune in anytime you want and hang out. You can even call in. And I don't think I got any messages from anybody that wanted to call in, but you can always people can always call in. Just go to the description underneath, or go to soluciopodcast.com, and the numbers are there. Just send me a text, in the second half of the show, and I'll call you back, and we'll have a conversation. You're very welcome. If you're thinking, you're welcome, Theo. Now I know Theo can very much understand what we're doing here. This is right up his alley. And you journal on Notepad. Okay, yeah, exactly. However works for you. Sometimes shadow work. Connie, hi Connie. Sometimes shadow work shows a person how your vulnerability is your strong point. Shows you how your vulnerability is your strong point. Right. So your vulnerability, exactly. So let's say, this is very good. Your vulnerability will be connected to elements that are in your shadow. And you'll be going in there and you'll be finding. And as you are navigating this territory and dealing with all the knocks and scrapes that you get in relationship, you will be running into your vulnerability. And then when you start to pull out that vulnerability and go, well, where did this come from? Some of it is just pure sensitivity and empathic kinds of talents that you have that maybe you weren't able to use so expressly in life. Some of your vulnerability is tied to the leftovers of being wounded. And so in that case, you have to pull that material up and you have to kind of hash through what were the original things that did wound you, and you have to kind of reorient yourself around that, and you have to interpret what stories were formed in your psyche due to that original wounding. Or you might find that it was inherited. It's not fully yours. It's from your parents. And so the whole practice of doing shadow work, really, you could say, is a practice of embracing your vulnerability. You could say that, because everything that is inside of you that's shadowy, that is imbalanced, that imbalance itself is a vulnerability, right? And an extreme kind of reactiveness is sort of a compensation. A lot of narcissism and grandiosity is a compensation for feeling, for self-esteem issues, and for being not seen so well by the family, or cut down and put down. And so when you start to go into that and dig out some of that narcissism, then you find, yeah, there's a bunch of vulnerability in there. There's a bunch of wounds in there, you could say. So whether vulnerability is wounds or whether it's more feminine qualities that you have as a woman or a man, because every man has feminine qualities too. He has an anima. And as you want to do that, men need to get in touch with their anima. And they need to be able to get in touch with their their masculinity as well, but then eventually they have to get in touch with their anima, they have to get in touch with their vulnerability, their sensitivities. So that's part of the work. You're welcome for the focus example and what I'm referring to, aggression, but in the sense to tackle goals. So it's all of that together in Robert Moore's system, and the ability, it's a willpower. It's that drive to get something done and to focus your energy and to say, I will do this, and then do it and get it done, and then be pleased with the results, satisfied with what you were able to get done. And everybody, and there's people who have don't have a whole lot of warrior energy on tap. And so they're having a hard time getting anything done. They're having a hard time focusing, especially now with the whole internet scrolling world and the low attention spans. We're all suffering from that. And so, the ability to be able to focus down and get something done and concentrate and achieve goals. And you go too far on that, and you have these goal addicts that it's just, all about success and success and progress and climbing the ladder and all of this, and it just becomes a disease, right? It's a pathology. But there's a certain amount of it that you have to be balanced in life, and to be a good family member and community member. Hi, Shelley. I'm a bit confused about the shadow energy that I feel from others when I'm feeling particularly light. Okay, yeah, let's talk about this. Am I subconsciously projecting my shadow, and that's why I'm feeling it from others? So when you're feeling pretty high, you're feeling really good, right? This is your libido. This is your dragon energy. This is your, you could call it grandiosity, but that's a little bit of a pejorative. But this is your chi, and this is your life force. And when you're in a really nice state, and you're feeling your life force, and you go out in the world, and you might notice that it will have different reactions on different people. Some people will get high off of it. Some people will be like, they want to be around you, they want to hang around you. You're so attractive, and they'll respond to it, and their eyes will open up, and they'll be like, you can tell that they're getting high on you. And then other people, it will trigger something negative. And that is because there's two reasons, or there's two sides of it, let's say. On their side of it is that some of their libido, their grandiosity, their joy, their empowerment is in their shadow, right? And so they're a little bit envious, and they're dissociated from their own supply. And so they might not respond very well, and this, you'll see this all the time. They may not respond very well. You'll see a split with different people. And so that's one thing. So they have an issue. They need to dig out their gold, and they need to pull it out. And if now they're psychologically aware, then they're going to notice how they felt when they got around you, when you were high and feeling good. And then they got around you, and that made them feel negative or made them want to attack you. If they're psychologically aware, they'll be like, why was I like that with Shelley? And why was I like that? And they'll use that opportunity. You will wake them up to part of their own shadow that they need to get into touch with. And so that's one side of it. On the other side of it, on your side of it, is that you have your greatness, you have your your genius. You have your gold, and but you also have some wounding. You also have a pain body. You also have a complex. You also have an exiled part. Those like 4 models right there. We can use different terms for different models like we went over tonight. And so that part is hiding back below. That's on the other side of the joy, of the libido. Right? So, and what is happening is that there is a bipolar complex in your psyche that's interacting with a bipolar complex in another person, and it's looking to do a flip. So you're getting high and you're feeling great and everything's awesome, and then you run into that person that has a similar bipolar pain body going on, complex, and then their pain body's looking to trigger yours to flip to the other side, so that you guys can both experience some pain, some grief, some states of low self-esteem, and get knocked down. Because the pain body's addicted to that stuff. It doesn't like the good stuff. It doesn't like the joy, the libido. That stuff, that's like kryptonite to it. So it won't let you stay high for too long. And you get high, you're feeling amazing, and then that thing will find someone else in the world who has a pain body that resonates with yours, that will trip yours and to flip you off your seat. And so then you can experience the polar opposite of that feeling, right? So let me know if that makes sense. And so the way to deal with that is, because you can't convince the other person to work on their shadow stuff. You can't just go around, and this is what some people do, they go around just blowing off everybody that triggered them, or everybody that, they found some kind of a shadow resonance with. And they go around going, oh God, man, there's so many yucky people out there. Ugh, it's terrible. And yeah, they all got shadow stuff. They all got complexes, pain bodies, but so do we. And so what we have to do, though, is we have to clean out our pain body stuff. So then when we got enough of that cleaned up, I don't know if you ever get all of it fully cleaned out, but you get enough of it cleaned out, then you won't start noticing that so much. Those occurrences won't happen so much, or you'll easily convert them to something more productive, and it won't be that big of a deal, because you went and found that wounded part, that vulnerable part, and you went and formed a relationship with it, that hurt little girl that's down there, that little girl part, and you started a relationship to her, and you started talking to her, and you started talking to her protector parts, we call it in IFS, and you start recognizing what happened to her and all of that, and you form a relationship with her, and you bring her into consciousness, and then she starts to feel more tucked in, she starts to feel more taken care of, and then her protector parts, which you could say in that system, protectors can be nasty. They can do all kinds of stuff. That's not just to protect you, but it's all kinds of very amoral kind of strategies to protect. Or if you look at it in the pain body description like I was using earlier, that psychic parasite needs to feed on something yucky, and so you're shrinking that thing. The more you drain that wound or drain that repressed grief, guilt, stuff that's down there, the more you drain that and bring that into consciousness, then the smaller that thing gets, and then these situations resolve themselves more easily. And this is a lifelong process. I just got into an argument with a good friend of mine. Not a bad argument, but a little bit of a little something we got into. And we're two pretty advanced people. And so these, and we're middle-aged, pretty advanced people, and we're still working on our stuff. Me and Melissa, we were still working on our stuff. And so it's, although, man, I'm not lost anymore. I'm not lost in projection. I'm not lost in reactivity. I can get into some kind of a little argument, and I can kind of work with it and let it work its way out. And I can come to realizations. Some of the realizations are about me. Some of the realizations are about the other person. Hopefully the other person can hear me. Sometimes the other person can't or doesn't want to, is just not ready to be able to hear my diagnosis. I want to at least be able to hear their diagnosis for sure. I have to be able to do that. So, and then it's just, this is it. This is our hero's journey, and we get better, we get cleaner. And how much better is it to have life that is dualistic? Life is dualistic. It's life and death. It's up and down. It's masculine and feminine. It's joy and sadness. It's all those things, and it just turns and turns like the seasons. And then to be able to be on that ride and be able to make meaning out of it and not get totally thrown for a loop by it, and to be able to tolerate the difficulties, to be able to pull up more joy, more genius, more gold, and use it, at least for a time. And it's like, and navigate this duality spectrum somewhat successfully. And when I say success or successfully, I do not mean anything to do with the material success whatsoever. And to be able to navigate this successfully, and then to be able to do that with other people. If you can find other people that can be on this with you, then man, you got a good thing going on. Now you're in this alchemical world of you're pushing the cutting edge of human evolution. That's what you're doing. When you're on this ride, this is the evolution ride. You're pushing the cutting edge of evolution. When you're like on this ride and you're really working with this stuff, all these famous people, rich and famous people, they're not doing this. They're not that advanced. They group together in groups, in networks, and then they pull each other up and protect each other as a network. But that's their strength, because as individuals, we can see now with all this kind of stuff like Epstein files and all this kind of stuff, they're pathetic, a lot of them. And so they're not on the evolutionary path. So they have all this material wealth and success and fame and stuff, but they're not evolved on the inside. And that's really actually bad for the whole society, because the whole society has to have their gaze on these people that psychologically, or let's say unconsciously, we all know. We may not know consciously, but unconsciously we know we're staring at somebody who's not advanced. They might be bright, they might have a lot of grandiosity, it may be very bright and shiny and stuff, but they don't have wisdom, they don't have depth, they don't have maturity. And then we are looking to them like they are our surrogates, they are our leaders, they are our heroes. And that's very degrading to us. So we become real leaders. We become real heroes. We become mature people at our level, where we are in our life, wherever we are, and that's it. That's what this is. That's what we're doing. We're just becoming mature people in place. We don't even need to. It's good to have your genius seen, and to have quote unquote success, meaning just being able to put your genius into the world and having it, and being able to have it do something in the world. That's good. You want that. But that's something that happens just as you mature and as you stay on the path. So, where are we, you guys? Thank you all for hanging out tonight. It's 9:39. I'm in Central Time, so I haven't cooked dinner yet, so I'm gonna have to go do that. And so Tuesdays I eat dinner late is the way I deal with it. But this was a good one today. And I thank you guys for hanging out. If anybody has any final comments or questions, you're welcome, Shelly, and you're welcome back anytime, any Tuesday, and this 7 p.m. Central, we're here. And if you have, oh, you know what? Someone asked me a question last week, and I hope that if they're even who that was that asked me that question, and I needed to answer that before we go. Questions here. And this was, oh yeah, golden shadow. We talked about golden shadow. That's fantastic. Yeah, we did talk about golden shadow. And what would you do even if you didn't get paid for it? Let's see here. Oh, that was my answer. Yeah, my answer about the golden shadow. What is the golden shadow? Let me read the question here. It was, I particularly am interested in Jung's golden shadow. I really want to connect with my gifts. I've been in a shadow work process in the underworld. Yeah, you've been doing the Persephone thing. My light got very dimmed, and I'm seeking the parts of myself that contain it. And I wrote down, golden shadow, what makes you feel good to do? What are you naturally good at? What did you love as a child that you still love? What would you do even if you didn't get paid for it? What makes you feel scared to do, but also gives you a rush when you imagine doing it? What do you fantasize about? What do people tell you you're good at? And as you do more shadow work, new realizations will appear. Stay awake when triggered, develop the watcher, always get higher out of your reactivity and stuff. And I hope those kinds of descriptions there help you to kind of pinpoint what your golden shadow is. And as you get more of the junky shadow out of the way, then the golden shadow, because a lot of times the golden shadow is held back by shame and fear. And so the more you process the shame and fear, then the golden shadow can come out, and you can keep trying to get your hands on it and pull it out and stuff like that. And then when you do get your golden shadow in your hands and you're feeling high and things are flowing and stuff, you got to be careful, especially if you've been in the underworld a lot and your ego is fragile. If you get super grandiose and super high, and everybody's loving you, and you're getting a job, or you're just feeling so high on energy, whatever it is, you're being so creative, you have to be careful. You need to explore that energy, that gold, but you also need to be careful with yourself, because you might be fragile, and you definitely don't want other people telling you degrading you or anything like that. You need to set boundaries. This is important. This is the warrior energy. So when you are coming out of the underworld and you're grabbing some of your shadow and you're feeling good, you definitely don't want to let other people degrade you, put you down or anything. You got to set strong boundaries with that. Because like I was talking about earlier, you'll attract other people with a pain body, and then you'll do the pain body game with them. And that'll knock you back down into the underworld. But you also don't want to just get so high on 93 octane gas and then just start flying around and get hurt, because then you're going to be like, oh my God, this hurts. I don't want to come back out again. So you got to be careful with your energy. When it's depressed, there's something back there that needs to be. You got something in the way. There's some kind of fear. There's some kind of shame. There's some kind of shadow material that's in the way of your libido. And so you got to work on that and get that up and metabolize that. But at the same time, you don't just let the fire hydrant just, And so you want to be careful, and you want to keep everything balanced. And I mean, Robert Moore says that once you get your container pretty strong, and you're feeling like you got your juices going, and you're feeling pretty competent in what you're supposed to do, then you do need to let it rip. You do need to let it rip, but you don't want to go too far with it. if 50% is the middle and you're going to go up to 75, 80% or something, okay, but you don't want to fly up to 100% and then just crash and burn. But by the time you get there, though, by the time you get to where you're feeling really strong and competent after a crash, or after a lifetime of feeling kind of not so high and strong, you just got to be careful you got to be gentle. You need to experience your energy. You need to get in your flow. You need to protect yourself from people who are trying to knock you down. And you need to build yourself up. But you don't need to let your ego get all big, because then it'll just pop and you get hurt again. So definitely you want to feel your energy, but you definitely don't. You just got to take care of yourself. So that's what I would say with that. All right, everyone. So thank you all so much. I hope to see you next Tuesday. If you have any comments or questions that are beyond today's talk, feel free to send them to me, message me. You can go to the main website, shadowtechalchemy.com. You can watch the trailer for the movie about Melissa, melissamarimovie.com. And if you want to see the whole movie, it's very deep. You get to learn about this incredible mystic artist woman, my wife of 12 years, incredible human being, badass alchemist. And it's very deep, and it's got dark stuff in it. It's very honest, and I'm getting some really amazing reviews on it. And so I know that it'll affect you and that it'll help you if you want to watch it. If you do want to watch it, I'll just tell you guys actually what the website is right now, because I can do that right here. So you go to shadowtechalchemy.com/film. shadowtechalchemy.com/film. And it's right there. The password's right there. You can watch the whole movie and then let me know what you think about it. So there we are. Have a great week, and I will talk to you all very soon.